Welcome to the Wanting to Wealthy podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Hogan. As someone who grew up in a pretty scarce environment and came out of college with a lot of debt, stuff, and insecurity, I thought that was just the lot I had to deal with in life. After several years of this, I decided that there had to be another way and gave away over half of my stuff, started working on my debt, and began looking at things through a lens that focused on my values and not what I thought others thought I should be doing. This podcast is all about the journey that happens from wanting to wealthy, and I'm so glad you decided to be part of it.
Today's episode of the podcast is going to be talking about what do you do when the unexpected happens. While we can prepare for a lot of things to happen, sometimes they happen before we're fully prepared. I've seen it recently with friends and family members, with myself, just weird things happening. And then I'll give you several examples of stuff that have happened in my personal life. At the end of the episode, but we just can't always be prepared. And so this episode is really about what are those times and how do we address those times when we're not as prepared as we could have been. Because looking back, we, hindsight being 2020, we can always be more prepared than what we are now, right? So in past episodes, I have talked about funding emergency funds, both the $1,000 and the 6 to 12 months. I've talked about having bills on auto pay so we don't forget payments, paying off consumer debt and staying debt free. Things that I haven't talked about, but I will do an episode on in the near future, are stuff like, do you have enough of the required insurances that we're legally required to have, like auto insurance and homeowners insurance? And then supplementally to that, do we have supplemental insurance like renter's insurance, AD&D, medical insurance, and other supplemental insurances that go along with medical insurance, like long-term care and critical care. And really, we try to do all the preparation in the world, but sometimes it just doesn't go our way, right? Or sometimes things happen one thing after another, and there's just not a way that we can keep up with it. So sometimes we just aren't prepared for something to go sideways. And so going forward, here are some steps that you can take to make things as okay as possible until you can get back to normal. And I use normal air quotes because normal is different for all of us, because maybe you don't want to be back to whatever your normal was, because sometimes we can't physically get back there. Stuff happens, and some things are irreparable and we can't just go back to normal. So first and foremost, I want you to take care of the emotional and physical stuff. Did a financial contributor within your household lose their job? Are they in a labor dispute because they're in a union and they're on one side or the other and somebody's not working? Did a pandemic happen? Things that we can't necessarily prepare for. Did a financial contributor get sick or get in a car accident or get diagnosed with a medical issue like cancer or having a medical emergency, or maybe they're someone that they're caring for had one of those things happen, their child, their parent, their somebody that they're personally responsible for, where they need to focus on that person and not making money. Did they lose someone close to them? And this could be both a physical death, or excuse me, a physical loss like a death, or a loss of a long-term relationship, whether this be a friend, a parent, a sibling, a romantic partner. Did we lose something that's been around for a really long time. And now it's just gone. All of these things can take an emotional as well as a physical toll in a lot of these cases on the person making the money, or both the people making money, or if there's more than two people, all of the people making money within whatever unit you're working in. And we have to look at it from the emotional and the mental health side as well as the physical side, because sometimes if we don't allow the mental health side to be addressed, the emotional side to be addressed, then we have these rippling repercussions. Like, I've seen situations where someone is so distracted when they're driving to work, they get with something that's happening in their own life, that they get into an accident and now they're physically hurt too. I've seen situations where they're so distracted at work, something happened, there's a gross misconduct, and now they don't have a job as well as whatever's going on. And it's because we're not thinking at it as a whole unit, an emotional unit, a physical unit, a mental health unit. So we need to be willing to take the time to address how we're feeling mentally before we go any further. Okay. Once that is done, assess the situation. What does your emergency fund look like? Do you have one? If you do, is it fully funded? Do you have an insurance that covers some or part of what is happening? So look at all the insurances that you have access to and call your agents and ask, does this cover this situation? Um, if not, can you get retroactive insurance? It's likely not something that will happen, but it's worth looking at and seeing, can you get something like that? Do you have any benefits at work or through the state or federal governments that will help? Like, many companies have bereavement pay, which is separate from family leave pay, sick pay, and vacation pay. When my grandfather passed away, I had to bring in a copy of his obituary and I got 3 days of bereavement pay. When a family member passed away, a different family member, my parents were able to take off, specifically, I think it was like 4 days because of that family member. Of course, every policy is different. Some don't allow bereavement, some only allow bereavement of, say, a parent or a spouse's parent or child. But it is a benefit that sometimes is overlooked because we don't use it super often, right? Family leave. So I live in Oregon. Oregon has state family leave, and then we also have the Family Medical Leave Act. That's a federal paid item. Both of those may help with the finances while you're going through whatever it is you're going through. You have to look at the situation. You have to look at the rules and regulations involved with those situations. You may have to call some people, but both of those could be options. Do you have any sick pay? Most of the time, if you have sick pay, you can use it even if your child's sick. You can use it if your partner is sick. Your employer doesn't have a right to ask you what you're using it for. Some employers will like the heads up and they'll say, oh, you're going to use sick pay on Tuesday. Okay, thanks for letting me know. No, others will try and tell you, if you give me a heads up, I'm going to make you use your vacation pay first before your sick pay. So then you have to call day of. So you just have to look at what the policy is in your case. Short and long-term disability that your work pays for. So some employers will pay automatically for either short or long-term disability and then give you the option to pay for the other one. Or you can have short or long-term disability being paid for separately outside of work. But sometimes your employer will pay that, and then you can figure out how you can access that and what your options are. And then last would be vacation pay or leave without pay. So some places will call that LWOP, some places will call it approved or unapproved leave without pay. So when my son was born, my husband had only been at his job for 3 months. So he didn't technically have any vacation time yet, but he was given approved leave without pay. So he wasn't going to lose his job, but he was able to be there for the 3 days of that week when he was born, when my son was born on a Wednesday. And then my husband had to go back to work until the following Monday. That was helpful. So assess where you have access to things. Then make a game plan. Okay. So inform those that need to know. This may be the employer of yourself or another partner. For example, when I was working in I was working for a Fortune 500 company. My husband was working in a union, operators union, and he had been injured on the job about 5 hours from me and was in the hospital, had to have surgery, so on and so forth. So I had to call my employer and tell him, hey, I need to leave. I need to go take care of my partner and get him out of the hospital. And it ended up being a much larger to do because at the time, I was the manager of a store, and then my assistant manager had suddenly lost his dad. So my assistant manager was out of state dealing with his dad's estate. And he got back to work on Friday, and I left Thursday night, the night before. So he and I basically flip flopped, and then I was gone for over 3 weeks because we had to go to a different state because of everything that was going on with my husband. And so I had to keep my employer informed of what was happening. Other people that might need to know are landlords or mortgage companies, um, stakeholders. So a stakeholder is anyone that you owe money to or anyone that has an interest or a stake in your thriving. Okay, so a stakeholder could be someone like your child. Your child normally goes to, say, dance class. And if you all of a sudden are without an income, they need to know that you're not going to be able to take them to dance class for a little while. It might be a daycare provider. It might be medical professionals. It might be school, either your school, your child's school, if your child's acting out of the ordinary because there was a death in the family, then a daycare provider or school or a coach might need to know that information. You don't have to tell everybody everything, but if you're telling people enough to explain what's happening, it goes a long way for their ability and understanding to work with you and work with your situation. Um, After you've told people, use any assistance you have access to, whether that be insurance, FEMLA, sick pay, vacation pay, bereavement pay, whatever resources you found when you were assessing the situation, work on utilizing those resources. They're there for a reason. You pay for them for a reason. You have access to them as a benefit for a reason. So try not to allow pride to get into the way of utilizing resources. And then very next thing, oh, again, this is a pride thing that tends to happen sometimes, is telling friends and family that might be willing to help. You're not saying, hey, I lost my job. Please do XYZ things for me. But if you say, hey, I lost my job, I'm not going to be able to pay for daycare, but I do need to be able to have somebody watch my kid while I go look for another job, then someone may volunteer and say, I can look after your kid, or something like that. Another thing someone might do is set up a meal train, or fill up the gas in your car, or offer to carpool for you, or if you have to go out of town because someone is needing your help out of town, somebody might offer to house sit for you. Somebody might help with bills. One of the stories I'm going to share at the end of the podcast, my grandmother helped me pay bills. And I went to my friends and said, is there any work I can do for you or your family so I can make some money so I can cover these things? So if you let people know that something is happening, people like to help people. People don't necessarily like to be asked to do things, but if you say, this is the thing that is happening to me, a lot of people will volunteer to help in some fashion. I had a good friend of mine be diagnosed with cancer last year, and there were people that we hadn't hardly talked to, who were asking me and asking my friend, when could they drop off a meal? When was there anything that they could do for us? Yeah, because they wanted to know how to help, and being able to go, oh, no, 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 I don't need anything, kind of makes people feel useless. Not that it's your responsibility to make people feel useful, but people like to help other people. So having something that they can help with, even if it's, would you take my dog to the groomer? Here's the money, here's gas money for it, but would you do this thing for me? Is a huge help. Then after that, you can look at your priority list, which is the list of things of order, which is the order in which you prioritized your budgeted items. What are you paying first? What are you paying second? What are you paying third? Okay. And that's going to tell you how to deal with the situation. So I like taking a bottom up approach when you're looking at this priority list, because sometimes that can be easier than making the big phone calls. So in theory, the thing at the top is going to be the thing that you are most likely to pay with any money you have available. The thing at the bottom is the thing that you're not going to be paying. So go to the bottom of the list and cancel or temporarily shut off as many things as you can. That's going to give you a bunch of really quick wins to close down your Spotify account, to shut down Netflix temporarily, to remove that kind of stuff. So then you can re up it when you have the cash flow again. But for now, you just temporarily shut it down. Then you're going to make sure the lenders know something is happening. Okay, so when you do that, you call them and say, hey, this is my situation. What can I do? And some things will be, they have assistance plans or they have scholarship funds that are going to help pay for something. Maybe it's only for a month, but that happens. Some will have low income payment plans that you can be put on, or deferments that you can be put on. Some have skip payments. One of our trucks, the bank that the loan is through, once you've made 12 consecutive payments, allows you to skip one payment per year. And it just tacks onto the back of the loan. So you pay a little more in interest, but being able to tack it onto the back of the loan is way less expensive than missing the payment. And now you're 30 days and counting behind. Some will let you do reduced payments, and you say, hey, I only have $10 I can give you this month. And they go, cool, we'll take it. Some will there is rules around whether or not they can actually shut off whatever you're paying for. For example, electricity and heat. If you have children, some places, some states have it in law that they cannot shut off your heat or your electricity or your water if you have children in the home. So just being allowed to look at that. And then some will allow you to just skip payments and pay later, as long as you keep in communication with them. So if you're calling this lender every month and saying, hey, this is where I'm at, this is what I've done, this is how much money I had, this is the availability, they'll keep you in the loop on things, and you'll keep them in the loop, and they'll keep you from going under. Last, pay based off the priority list. So be okay if you have to. You've done all the work that you can possibly do, that sometimes you might have to fix things, like your credit, because you missed a payment. It happens. It will be okay. It will not be the end of the world. Um, it will be salvageable. You getting hurt or you getting fired because you're so distracted with something else that is happening does not work. You trying to keep it bottled up does not work all the time. Um, because we work in communities and our communities will come help us if we give them the opportunity to do so. And like I said, you don't have to give every detail in the world, but giving some detail goes a long ways in the ability for others to try and step up to our aid and for us to utilize the resources that we've got access to, even when we aren't fully prepared. So, with those kind of thoughts, I'm going to give you several examples of things that have happened either to me or within my life, my family, and how we address those situations. So, first and foremost, um, my mom was diagnosed with cancer when I was 9. That was a long term thing. But when I was a freshman in college, it escalated to brain cancer. And I got a phone call one day that basically said, hey, your mom's in the hospital. You should probably get in the car. And I went to school 5.5 hours away from where my mom lived. And so there were several things that I did. I was a broke college student. So first I called my friend. My friend said, I'm driving you. You're not driving 5.5 hours by yourself. So she drove me to a halfway point. My dad picked me up. One. Two, I called my employer and I said, hey, I ain't going to be there for I don't know how long. And his response was, okay, go assess with your mom and then come to me and let me know what's going on. And so when that happened, he set up, because I worked for a different large company at the time, he set up me working local to my mom. I had to clock in once every 2 weeks, once a pay period, just to keep my employment up. And if I didn't do that, then I would just be rehired when I came back because I communicated with him because he knew this was a thing. Um, my landlord, I called her, told her what was going on, and she said, okay, you still owe money for stuff, but I will go by your house once a week and make sure everything's okay. So she did that. And then that is when I went to my friends and my friends' families and went, anything I can do to make money here in where my mom is while I was helping with her, while I was learning how to be a state care provider so I could get paid to help take care of my mom, while I was trying to maintain stuff. I had to call my teachers, and my teachers gave a variety of things in college. One just gave me the score that I would have earned 6 weeks into the course instead of the full 10. One let me do a proctoring situation with my retired college professor grandfather. He proctored me and finished up that course. And one let me take an incomplete and I finished it in the fall. So, but because I communicated with everybody, we came up with a solution that worked for everyone. And that was all just related to my mom's um, brain cancer. And that 10-day stint, she was in the hospital. And I ended up being in the Valley from May until September when she told me to go back to school, trying to help take care of her from where I was 5 hours away at school. But those are all people I had to talk to make sure that stuff got paid and everything was okay. My grandma ended up helping me pay for things, so I didn't lose my apartment and stuff like that. Another one that happened when I was a kid was my freshman year of high school. My dad and my stepmom were in an 8-month labor dispute uh, with their work. and they were locked out for 8 months from their job. And they approached the labor dispute slightly differently than some people did. And it wasn't just them, there was lots and lots of people that were in the same situation. And there was a whole host and variety of different things that happened based upon how people were being communicated with. For example, I don't know all the details. I was 14 when this happened. I turned 15 right after the situation was resolved, but they didn't have their normal regular jobs. So we didn't have insurance for 8 months, health insurance. I had braces, my brother had braces, so I know my dad had to call the orthodontist and say, hey, I don't have the money to pay for their braces, and he worked out a payment plan with them. They had a mortgage at the time that they had to figure out. My dad did things like bucking wood, and my stepmom got a secretary job, and my dad called his family members and said, hey, do you have anything I can do to get some money? And they were humble enough to make it work, and they were not overextended enough to where nothing went sideways, which was a good thing. But they also had, three teenagers at the time. And so what I do know is that they fared a lot better than some of the people that they went to work with, and they probably fared worse than others who may not have had kids in the house at the time. We also had horses at a boarding facility, so I know my dad had to do work there, and I had to do work there to make sure that the horses were fed and still had a place to live. In 2017, I was laid off, and I kind of knew it was coming, so I was able to build a little bit of a savings. But at that point, I was still very early in my financial journey. So I didn't have a ton of savings. I only had about 3 months worth. But being laid off work, even when you don't particularly care for your job, is still devastating. It still feels like you've done something wrong and you have to work through that. And then you need to start navigating unemployment or something like that. So, in my case, I navigated unemployment for a while, and I really started digging into finances to learn how to be better at that situation. Um, we've had family members pass away. I gave you the example of when my grandfather passed away. Um, and I was working, and then also when my stepmom had a family member pass away when they were at work, and how that situation was affected. We've had family members pass away very, very recently where my parents needed to go out of town, and then I was the one watching their dogs and house sitting for them because they told me what was going on, and we worked as a group to figure things out. Birth of a child. My son came just 5 days earlier than when we had a C-section scheduled, but it was still earlier. I've had friends who have had children come way sooner than expected. And so maybe they weren't fully prepared yet, and they didn't have the crib set up. So somebody goes to their house and sets the crib up, or somebody takes care of their dogs, or a meal train gets started because they didn't do all the meal prep that they wanted to do, or they were hoping to get through XYZ things at work before this happened. Children don't always follow our timeline. So it's something that while we can prepare because we know that it's going to happen, sometimes they come way earlier than we expect them to. And along with that can be medical emergencies. I had a friend who had his dad have a heart attack about a week before his son was born 5 weeks early. Those things happen. And so you've got both situations. If dad was supposed to be taking care of their older child at the time, now dad's in the hospital and mom's with them. Now who's taking care of the older child when the baby comes way sooner than what was expected? And that goes for both acute emergencies and long-term medical emergencies. So acute is something that happens and is done very shortly. So it might just be somebody broke their arm, somebody had some sort of very quick medical event. And then long term is going to be something like cancer or recovery from a bad accident or something like that. So when we're looking at those, we have to look at them from two stands. Like, are you going to be able to get back to work in a week? Or are you going to be back to work in 6 months? And how does that affect the situation? Um, and I've had both of those happen in my um, life, both to me and to family members and friends. And then the it goes right back up to who are we communicating with, and we don't have to say what the emergency was. We can literally say, hey, I had a medical procedure done, um, and therefore I'm going to be not as quick returning emails, or I'm going to be a little further behind and I'm going to miss a payment, or I'm going to need to skip a payment, or I'm going to be 10 days late on a payment. Some places like mortgages give you like a 10 to 15 day grace period before they report to your credit that you're late on paying a mortgage. So being able to utilize that occasionally, or being able to call and ask for a late fee to be reversed because this is the first late fee you've ever had and you missed it by 2 days. A lot of times, if you ask, they will accommodate those kind of situations. And then last but not least are car accidents. I had a car accident where my car was totaled. And so I had to call a friend to come pick me up. I had to have that same friend take me to school the next day. I had to work with my roommate to go to school, go to work with her and school with her because we were going to the same school. So she could drop me off early because then I didn't have a car. But then I also had to talk to insurance companies because of the car situation. I just recently had another set of friends get into a car accident, and one of them was just out of school and she was starting to pay back student loans. And she messaged me and she's like, hey, I can't work because I've had this accident. Would you help me figure out how I'm supposed to pay my bills? And we've had that discussion to help them work through until they can work again and how they can adjust things. Car accidents are often out of nowhere and can take a lot of time depending on if it's your fault or their fault, or if there was a hit and run incident, or if there was criminal charges brought along. Like, there's so many nuances to car accidents and whether or not said car accident is going to be covered by car insurance or medical insurance. For example, when I was in high school, I was in 3 separate accidents in 2.5 weeks, right after my parents came back from being locked out for 9 months. And one of those accidents was on sports insurance that I had through school, coupled with being picked up by medical insurance. And 2 of them involved cars. So those were not on medical insurance, those were on car insurances, even though I went to the emergency room in all 3 of those instances. So the reason that I tell you about all these different situations, and this is tip of the iceberg because stuff happens to me, is that stuff happens, and to give ideas of how we can utilize the information that we have, the situation that exists, and what we can do differently to completely not go down financially in the process of life happening to us. So with that in mind, I will be doing an episode, at least one episode, on insurance in the near future. Insurance is a huge topic when I teach this at the college level. It's usually 4 1.5-hour lectures to get through all of insurance. So if you have very specific insurance questions, please DM me or send them to me on a Patreon post so I can address those as requested.
Thank you so much for supporting myself and the Wanting to Wealthy podcast. For more free content, consider signing up for the monthly newsletter at wantingtowealthy.com/subscribe. Please share the podcast with someone you think can get value from it, and screenshot yourself listening and share it on social media. I would love it if you tag me at Wanting to Wealthy when you do. If you are ready to take the next step for yourself and your financial journey, become a community member at patreon.com/wantingtowealthy. The Wanting to Wealthy podcast was produced, recorded, and edited by myself, Ashley Hogan.